Welcome back to the Lincoln Diesel project. This is the sixth video in our series. In this video, we're going to take a look at things in the engine bay, that are not the engine itself, and then things like the exhaust and stuff like that. So before we get into it, hit the subscribe button and the like and all that cool shit, and we'll go from there. All right, so jumping on with the exhaust then. This is the original downpipe from the BMW. It's had a DPF delete at some point, and so I just wanted this end that is the actual turbo end, and then it's got the sensors in it as well. And the rest of the downpipe won't really work with the chassis in the Lincoln or the bodywork or the tunnel in the Lincoln. So I just wanted this end, and then from here I can sort of weld what I need to get it going in the right direction. So I'm just bolting this back up now. So I've just got the sort of the flange and the sensors, and then I'm just bolting that back up to the turbo. There's a good amount of room here for me to work with, which is handy. So yeah, it just made the job a little bit easier than having the tunnel be really close, and I couldn't really get in there. So this was quite handy. So I've bolted that on there, and you can see I've got it rotating upwards because directly below it is the chassis rail. And now I'm just connecting up some pie cuts. So these are a tube that's been cut in the shape of a pie, hence the name. And I'm just tacking a couple of these together into the shape of a bend, like you can see there. So just with a simple tack, because I know that I need the exhaust to come up, and now I want to take it back down towards the floor. So I'm just tacking a few of those in, so I've got a bend. And then I can take it back to the car and just sort of work with it and get it in a position where I want it. And basically it's just a process of just tacking together these pie cuts and shaping the exhaust. So there you go, you can see I've taken the bit that I cut off of the exhaust that will go down, and then the pie cut bend basically to make them join back together, those two pieces join back together but go in the direction I want. So I know I need a bit more of a bend, so I've added another pie cut. I think these are about 15-degree pie cuts. And you can see there you go, it's working in a direction, and that's not too bad there. So I've just got to align the direction of it. I know I can tack that in there. And there you go, on the bench, tacking it together, and just that extra little bit of a bend to the exhaust there has given me a good basis to work on, and that should fit and give me a good downpipe. So just tack that in position. I'm quite happy with that, as you can see. So just tacking that on, and then we'll take a look at it and see, make sure I'm happy with it, make sure it's going, the output of it is going down to where I want it to be for the rest of the exhaust to hook up. Obviously that bit that I've welded back on has got the flexi bend in it for the exhaust. So underneath you can see I've got loads of room around it, and then sort of here it will come, the original exhaust sits here in this gap, and I can make it marry up to that downpipe. It's clear of the steering rod, that side doesn't move, it's the other end that moves. So yeah, there's a good spot there. So I'm just going to get some extra tacks on this exhaust with it as it is. I don't want to get unbolting it and then break the tacks that I've done, because they're only very light tacks. So I'm just tacking it all together, and then we can remove it. Okay, so this is the ECU mount in there, and it was a nice spot for it. Keeps all the wiring at the back, so it's a bit safe and stuff. And we just used the BMW Machines 4x4 bracket, and then just re-drilled a couple of holes in the top of it to take up on these two holes here, which are part of the bonding batch. And then all the stock BMW relays and fuses and stuff are just mounted straight onto that as well. And then there's some extra bits down here that come with the BMW Machines 4x4 loom that I've added on there as well. So it's all together, it's all as neat as it can be. We'll tidy up these odd loose wires that we're not using in this application to come with the loom. And that'll be nice and simple, and everything's really easy to get to there. You know, if a fuse goes or the relay packs up or whatever, it's easy to get to. So mounting the fuel pump now, it's an inline BMW pump, and I want to mount it somewhere where it's easy to access, so we don't need to run miles and miles of wire into it and minimise pipework and stuff like that. So a good spot for it is here, sort of on the side of the bell housing. The injection pump is sort of the front side of the engine on this side, so we just need to make up a bracket here for these two bolt holes. So just using a bit of CAD, I have just knocked up a little plate here, and then you can see it just wants a bent there. So just going to knock this up out of a bit of thin steel and see how it goes. So there's the fuel pump mount. You can just about see the bracket, which is here. And that's just really, really simple. Mounted it on a universal clamp for a 55mm diameter pump. And it sits there quite easy, and it's nice and easy to get to if ever it needs changing as well. The next task that I needed to sort of figure out was the shifter for shifting the gearbox, so from park neutral, reverse and drive and all that stuff. On the BMW, obviously there's a shifter on the transmission tunnel, which is here, and it's run by a cable, super simple. On the Lincoln, it's on the column here, which you don't see on any British cars really past the 70s, I think. And it runs via a rod instead of a cable. So we need to connect this end basically to the gearbox end, which is quite a lot further forward than the transmission tunnel. I didn't want to, we could have used the BMW one and stuck it down on the transmission tunnel here, but then we'd need to make some sort of cubby box, you'd lose the middle seat, it'd just look odd and ugly and wouldn't really fit, whereas this is completely standard. When the bonnet's closed and the doors are shut and stuff, you know, you don't know that there's a BMW engine under there, and I quite like it that way, and I want to keep it that way. So we're going to connect this bit to the bit under the bonnet. So on the underside of the car, we're just taking a look at the original link rod from the Lincoln shifter setup, and this is just up here, and it's just held on by some circlips. So I'm just pulling this off, and you can see here it's just like an 8mm rod with a couple of bends in it. So we're just mimicking that with a bit of 8mm rod with a couple of bends in it that's slightly longer, that will hook into the original Lincoln setup, and then like that you can see that's the sort of length I want and the sort of place I want it to be to operate the gearbox selector. Originally I was thinking about using a separate piece of steel to act as a linkage as well. With a bit more thought I looked into it, and it was just a case of moving the selector arm on the gearbox that would allow me to put this rod in the specific position I want. So we're just changing the slot on the one end, and that means that the angle that this lever is sitting at now is slightly different. So when I put the rod up, everything will work as it should and in the direction it should be working in. Okay, so that's the shifter hooked up inside the engine bay at this end, and it's obviously a really, really simple way of doing it. We've got down here the end of the column, if you like. There's a column running through the steering column that comes out here, and we've basically, via this rod, linked it straight up to the gearbox, and that works brilliantly now. So we've got this shifter set up. It was super simple, but arguably easier than the BMW setup, and it all works. We've got the pivot points right and everything, so it works great. So with the rad pack, this is the stock BMW 5 Series rad pack with the big electric fan, intercooler there at the bottom. This is the steering cooler and obviously the main rad, and then at the front that's the steering cooler, intercooler, and then the air conditioning rad. So this is the space I've got at the front of the Lincoln, which isn't tons, but it's not a tiny gap either. So to mount this whole rad pack, I basically need to sit it in a cradle and then sort of support it at the top. So here you can see I've drilled out a couple of the factory brackets to get them out of the way, and I'm essentially going to make my own cradles using a bit of box section like this. So this is the standard rubber that the rad pack sits in on the side of the rad, and I just want to make myself a nice little cup arrangement that's going to mount that rubber kind of like this. So the rubber will just sit in there, and there you go, there's a better shot of it, so you can see the rubber's sat in there, and that's where it's going to live. So let's knock up another one of those. So this cup I've made that's going to hold the rad rubber, I basically now need to mount it to the Lincoln body, and I've got a couple of options. I've got this option on the side here that you can see the two bolts are. I can go from the cup to these to this plate where these two bolts are, or make something that's going to pick up off those two bolts. So the other option I've got is to make up a bracket that connects those two cups together and then bolts down to the chassis in the Lincoln, essentially making a frame underneath the rad pack. So I'm just using a bit of 3mm flat bar here, and then I've stuck two bends in it, as you can see, and we're going to just weld those two cups to it, and you can see I'm picking up on the left hand one and then across to the right hand one like that, and that gives me something to bolt down into the chassis. So that's that steelwork bolted in there now permanently. Pins welded up, and those bolts drop through the factory holes, captive on top just to make assembly a load easier, just so you've got a nut on the bottom and that's it. So now we can drop the rad in, bolt up the top. On with some pipe work now then, and this is an intercooler pipe. I'm just rolling a bead on it so that the intercooler pipe, when it boosts, doesn't pop off, which is a really annoying thing if you've ever experienced that. So just using this bead roller, which is super handy, and it forms a nice bead like that. So this part of the pipe is the original BMW one there. You can see the logo on it, and it's got the boost sensor in it. So next up is the expansion tank, plumbing that, and then the top of the rad, plumbing the top of the rad as well, and figuring out where all that's going to go. So you can see here, we've got the expansion tank. If we stick it on the side of the wing, inner wing, we've got the main top hose of the rad. Then we've got the sort of the lower outlet from the expansion tank that's got to go down here into the main BMW system on the engine. So you can see I've just knocked that lower one up, and that goes really neatly around that boost pipe. Top hose goes up and over to the back of the engine, and then the little bleed off just runs round the rad and the top hose and into the bowl. So the next thing is the cooler for the auto box. On the BMW one you saw earlier, they have a really basic small sort of cooler thing that isn't brilliant. So I wanted to add in this nice cooler. Nice and easy, I've mounted it right in front of the rad. There's acres of space in the front part of this car, with it being so big, and then it was just a case of running the lines back to the cooler itself. I used one of the Syncro gearboxes, 6 HP takeoffs on the gearbox, which comes with AN10 fittings, so it's literally a couple of AN10 fittings on the gearbox, and then a couple on the cooler, and then just run the lines where you need them. Okay, so the rad's now in, dropped in, and then you can see I've added this viscous fan. It's nice and snug to the rad, but it's not on top of it sort of thing that's going to cause an issue. But it will cool really well, and it does. So for the top mounts, I've just made up some tiny little brackets that go from the rad back to the bodywork here, and that's worked out really, really well because they're nice and close, and it's not anything overbearing or bulky or unnecessary. It just bolts to the chassis and then to the rad itself. So moving on to pipework. For the most part, it's pretty simple, really. We've got the original BMW top hose, which is over here by me, and that goes straight to the rad. The bottom hose is more or less standard as well. And then there's just a few bits like the top intercooler pipe here, where I've shortened this sort of EGR delete piece, and that's given us a bit more clearance here. We've used the standard BMW fitting, which is this one, and then run some black silicone hoses all the way down to the intercooler basically, so it just drops down there with some Jubilee clips. Heater pipes are really simple as well. They're just standard heater pipes that go to the heater fittings here on the matrix, and then down to the standard BMW fittings on this side. So steering pipes were really simple as well. We've basically used one half of the Lincoln and then one half of the BMW and joined them. So I've literally cut the pipes, got the lengths I want, and then taken them to a pipe place, and they've basically just swaged these joints on here like that, and then it's allowed me to just bolt the two halves of pipe together, which is really handy. It means that it's not a custom pipe. It's using what was already there, and it all fits. Guys, thanks for watching. So yeah, we've got through a bunch of the little niggly bits and bobs, and we're working our way towards getting it running and right in the car. Next video is coming super soon, so stick around, keep your eyes open, subscribe, the little bell and all that stuff, and we'll see you in the next video.